June 6, 1944, just after midnight. Northern France lies under a low ceiling of cloud and wind. Along the Norman coast, German sentries stand in concrete positions. The Atlantic Wall stretches behind them. Steel, wire, minefields, artillery. Months of construction meant to make invasion impossible. Many German officers believe this night will pass like the others. False alarms, recon flights, nothing decisive. Far above, the sky begins to change. The sound comes first. A distant hum, then hundreds of engines. It grows louder, heavier, layered. Not bombers, not reconnaissance planes, transport aircraft, too many to count. Radar stations flicker, phone lines light up, anti-aircraft crews scramble into position. Searchlights cut upward, slicing the clouds. Flak guns open fire, filling the darkness with bursts of black smoke and orange flashes. Then shapes appear. Dark silhouettes fall from the aircraft. Hundreds, then thousands. Parachutes blossom across the sky, white and ghost-like, drifting into fields, villages, swamps, hedgerows. The German claim was simple. Any invasion would be crushed at the beaches. The coast would hold. The enemy would drown in the surf. But now the battlefield is no longer just the shoreline. It is everywhere. And by the time the first boots touch French soil, the war in Western Europe has already changed. The night leads directly into the forces that created it. By 1944, Germany believed it understood how the war in the West would be fought. For nearly 4 years, Adolf Hitler and the German High Command had expected an Allied return to continental Europe. They knew it was coming. The only uncertainty was when and where. From Norway to the Bay of Biscay, the coastline was transformed into what German propaganda called Fortress Europe. Concrete bunkers rose along beaches. Artillery batteries covered likely landing zones. Minefields filled the sand and the shallows. Steel obstacles waited for landing craft. Behind the coast, secondary defenses prepared to absorb any breakthrough. This system became known as the Atlantic Wall. On paper, it looked formidable. Thousands of strongpoints, millions of mines, heavy guns taken from captured French and Czech stockpiles, entire divisions assigned to static coastal defense. The assumption was clear. If the Allies could be stopped at the water's edge, the war in the West could be delayed indefinitely. This belief shaped every German decision. Hitler was convinced that the decisive battle would occur on the beaches themselves. He saw amphibious landings as fragile operations, dependent on precise timing and calm seas. Disrupt the first hours, and the invasion would collapse. Supplies would back up, troops would be pinned down, morale would break. The German army had reinforced this belief with experience. The Dieppe raid of 1942 had ended in disaster for the Allies. German defenses had held. Allied casualties were severe. To many officers, Dieppe proved the Atlantic Wall concept worked. But Dieppe also reinforced a dangerous simplification. German planning focused overwhelmingly on the shoreline. Inland defense was treated as secondary. Mobile reserves existed, but they were limited. Many units stationed in France were under strength or composed of older soldiers, convalescents, or men transferred from the Eastern Front. Air power had already shifted decisively. By 1944, the Luftwaffe could not guarantee air superiority over France. Fuel shortages, pilot losses, and constant Allied bombing had reduced German air strength to a shadow of what it had been. This made rapid movement during daylight increasingly risky. Still, confidence remained. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was assigned to inspect and strengthen the Atlantic Wall in late 1943. Fresh from North Africa, Rommel understood Allied air power better than most. He believed the invasion must be stopped immediately, before Allied forces could break out inland. Rommel pushed for stronger beach defenses, more mines, more obstacles, guns closer to the water. He wanted to kill the invasion at the shoreline. Other commanders disagreed. Senior officers in the high command believed armored divisions should be held back as mobile reserves. They argued that committing tanks too early risked wasting them on feints or airborne drops. Better to wait, identify the main landing, then counterattack decisively. This disagreement created paralysis. Armored divisions were split. Some remained under Rommel's authority near the coast. Others were held deeper inland under direct control of Hitler himself. Any large movement required approval from Berlin. The result was a defense system strong on paper but slow in reaction. Most importantly, German doctrine underestimated airborne operations. Airborne troops were seen as disruptive, not decisive. Their role, in German thinking, was to create confusion, seize bridges temporarily, or delay movement. They were not expected to shape the main battle. German planners believed airborne landings would occur after the beach assault, not before. They expected small drops, isolated units, and limited objectives. They did not expect the sky itself to become the opening battlefield. This assumption would matter when the night came. Because while Germany prepared to crush an enemy at the shore, the Allies were preparing to arrive from above. The Allied invasion plan grew from a hard lesson learned in blood. Earlier airborne operations had revealed both promise and danger. In Sicily in July 1943, Allied paratroopers had scattered badly. Navigation errors, friendly fire, and poor coordination caused heavy losses. Units landed miles from their targets. Some objectives were never reached. Yet even in failure, something became clear. Small groups of airborne soldiers had disrupted German movement far beyond their numbers. They blocked roads, cut communication lines, created confusion that spread faster than any bombing campaign. German commanders reported uncertainty that lasted for hours. Italy confirmed it again. Airborne landings near Salerno and later operations showed that paratroopers could seize key terrain before the enemy reacted. Bridges, crossroads, high ground, places that decided whether armor could move or not. By late 1943, Allied planners understood the equation. An amphibious landing could not succeed if German reinforcements reached the beaches quickly. Panzer divisions, even limited in number, could crush exposed troops in the surf. The beaches had to be isolated. That isolation could only be achieved inland. This is where airborne forces became essential. The invasion plan for Normandy, Operation Overlord, was built on layers: naval bombardment, amphibious landings, artificial harbors. But beneath all of it was a quiet requirement. German reaction had to be delayed. Airborne divisions would do that work. The task was precise and unforgiving. British airborne units were assigned to the eastern flank. Their objective was to secure bridges over the Orne River and the Caen Canal. These crossings controlled movement toward the invasion beaches. If German armor crossed them, the beachhead would be threatened within hours. American airborne divisions were assigned to the western flank. Their mission focused on the Cottonton Peninsula. Roads and causeways leading inland from Utah Beach had to be seized. Flooded fields meant only narrow routes could support movement. If Germans held those routes, American troops would be trapped. The airborne landings would occur first. Not at dawn, not after naval guns opened fire, but in darkness. The decision carried enormous risk. Night drops increased the chance of surprise, but navigation was limited. Pilots relied on visual markers, radar, and Pathfinder aircraft. Weather could disrupt formations. Flak could scatter planes. Even minor errors could send units far from their objectives. Planners accepted this risk because the alternative was worse. A daylight drop would face concentrated anti-aircraft fire. A late drop would allow German forces time to react. The only window was the hours before dawn. Training intensified. Paratroopers drilled endlessly. Night jumps. Equipment loads exceeding 30 kilograms. Weapons broken down and carried in bundles. Radios, demolition charges, medical kits. Every man learned his task down to the smallest detail. They were trained to fight dispersed. This was critical. Commanders understood that perfect landings were unlikely. Units might be scattered. Officers might be lost. Radios might fail. So soldiers were trained to operate in small groups, to improvise, to complete objectives with whoever they could find. American paratroopers carried a simple instruction: move toward gunfire, find friendly forces, take the initiative. British airborne doctrine emphasized precision and speed. Glider troops would land near objectives with heavier weapons. Paratroopers would secure landing zones and bridges. The human cost was understood in advance. Casualty estimates were high. Some planners expected airborne units to lose up to half their strength in the first hours. This was not hidden from the men. Many knew the odds. Letters were written, equipment was labeled, final briefings were delivered calmly, without drama. At the top of the chain stood General Dwight D. Eisenhower. The responsibility rested on his signature. On the night of June 5, 1944, Eisenhower met with airborne troops before they boarded their aircraft. He did not promise safety. He spoke about necessity, about timing, about the weight of what they were about to do. When the order was given, there would be no recall. The aircraft would cross the channel in darkness. Below them, German defenses waited for a battle at the shore. Above them, the sky would open first. The human angle begins long before the aircraft doors open. Most Allied paratroopers were in their early 20s. Many had never been under fire. Training had been hard, repetitive, and unforgiving, but it could not reproduce the silence of waiting inside a vibrating aircraft at night. They sat on canvas benches, knees pressed together, equipment heavy on their bodies. The smell of oil and sweat filled the fuselage. Red lights glowed near the doors. Some men prayed quietly. Others stared at the floor. A few joked, but the jokes were thin. Everyone understood the risk. They had been told directly that many would not return. Dog tags were taped together to silence them. Faces were darkened. Pockets were checked again and again. Across the channel, German defenders lived a different reality. Many coastal units in Normandy were not elite formations. Several divisions consisted of older soldiers, men recovering from wounds, or troops transferred from occupied territories. Some had limited combat experience. Equipment varied widely. Artillery pieces dated back decades. Vehicles were scarce, fuel was rationed, morale was uneven. Some believed the Atlantic Wall would hold. Others quietly doubted it. Allied air power dominated the skies during daylight. Supplies arrived slowly. Communication lines were unreliable. Training exercises were limited by fuel shortages and constant alerts. Technology shaped both sides. Allied aircraft included C-47 transports and gliders made of wood and fabric. They were slow and vulnerable. German flak batteries could tear them apart. Navigation depended on pathfinder teams marking drop zones with lights and radar beacons. If those teams failed, entire formations could drift off course. Weather compounded the risk. Cloud cover was heavy. Winds over Normandy were stronger than forecast. Pilots struggled to maintain formation while evading flak and searchlights. Some aircraft flew too low, others too fast. The carefully planned patterns began to dissolve. From the German perspective, the technology gap cut both ways. Radar detected aircraft, but it could not always distinguish between bombers, transports, or decoys. Phone lines were already damaged by bombing. Orders moved slowly. Reports conflicted. Some commanders believed the airborne activity was a diversion. This uncertainty spread quickly. The battlefield that emerged was not a clear front line. It was fragments. Small groups of soldiers, isolated gun positions, roads blocked by fallen trees or wreckage, villages lit by burning buildings and tracer fire. In this environment, discipline and initiative mattered more than numbers. Paratroopers who landed far from their objectives still fought. They ambushed patrols, cut cables, destroyed bridges, or simply created noise and confusion. German units, unsure of the scale of the landing, hesitated. What looked like chaos from the air began to generate pressure on the ground, and while individual soldiers fought in darkness, higher command struggled to understand what was happening. That struggle would define the next hours. Leadership shaped the night as much as weapons or weather. On the Allied side, authority had been deliberately pushed downward. Eisenhower accepted that once the airborne troops were launched, control would fragment. Orders were simple by design: secure crossings, block roads, delay German movement. If units scattered, junior officers and even enlisted men were expected to act on intent rather than instruction. This philosophy was tested immediately. Radio contact failed across wide areas. Drop zones were missed. Commanders landed miles from their men. Yet small groups continued to operate because they understood the purpose of the mission. They were not waiting for orders. They were already inside the enemy's rear. German leadership faced the opposite problem. The German command system was centralized and rigid. Major decisions required approval from higher headquarters. Panzer divisions were held in reserve, but releasing them depended on confirmation of the main invasion site. That confirmation never arrived cleanly. Reports flooded in from Normandy: paratroopers near Carentan, paratroopers near Sainte-Mère-Église, gliders near the Orne, bridges attacked, roads blocked, communications cut. Each report sounded serious. None explained the full picture. Some commanders believed the airborne landings were the main attack. Others believed they were a feint to draw forces away from the real invasion elsewhere, possibly near Pas-de-Calais. This belief had been reinforced by Allied deception efforts for months. Rommel was not present. He had returned to Germany for his wife's birthday and to discuss armored deployment with Hitler. Other senior commanders were also absent or unreachable. Decision-making slowed further. At the highest level, Hitler slept. Standing orders prevented armored units from moving without his direct authorization. Staff officers hesitated to wake him without certainty. Hours passed. This delay mattered. The moral angle of the night unfolded in the villages and fields of Normandy. Civilians woke to gunfire, aircraft crashing, and soldiers landing in their yards. Some helped paratroopers hide or navigate. Others hid themselves, unsure who controlled the area. Houses were damaged, livestock scattered, roads filled with debris. For German soldiers, the enemy felt everywhere and nowhere. Paratroopers fired, vanished, then reappeared elsewhere. Uniforms were unfamiliar. Voices spoke English in the dark. Shadows moved through hedgerows. What should have been a linear defense became a web of threats. German units hesitated to move at night. Orders emphasized caution. No one wanted to walk into an ambush. The enemy perception collapsed into uncertainty. What the Germans believed would be a controlled response became a series of local reactions. Each unit fought its own battle. Coordination dissolved. The airborne landings were not perfect. Many objectives were missed. Losses were heavy, but the effect was greater than the numbers involved. The sky had delivered disorder, and as the eastern horizon began to lighten, the consequences of that disorder moved toward the beaches. The night of June 5th into June 6th, 1944, unfolds without a single center. Aircraft cross the French coast in long, staggered streams. German flak opens fire almost immediately. Tracers rise in steady arcs. Searchlights lock onto fuselages, holding them in place as guns converge. Some transports erupt in flame. Others lurch and descend, damaged but flying. Inside, paratroopers stand as the red light glows. When it turns green, doors swing open and the wind tears through the aircraft. Men step into darkness. Some are hit before they leave the plane. Others fall cleanly, drifting toward fields they cannot see. Drops scatter, units land miles apart. Equipment bundles vanish into hedgerows and swamps. Soldiers drown in flooded fields. Others land on buildings or trees. Commanders gather whoever they can find and move immediately. In the West, American paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions hit the Cotentin Peninsula. Sainte-Mère-Église becomes one of the first towns in France to be entered by Allied troops. Fires from burning buildings illuminate parachutes, descending directly into German positions. Some men are shot while still hanging in their harnesses. Despite this, control points are seized. Causeways leading inland from Utah Beach are attacked. German strongpoints are overrun or bypassed. Bridges are destroyed or secured. Roadblocks appear where none were expected. In the east, British airborne troops land near the Orne River. Gliders crash into fields and hedges at high speed. Casualties are severe on landing. Yet, within minutes, assault groups move on their objectives. Key bridges are taken intact. The bridge over the Caen Canal, later known as Pegasus Bridge, falls within minutes of the first glider landing. German guards are overwhelmed before they can react. This success secures the eastern flank of the invasion before dawn. German alarms escalate. Reports reach headquarters describing widespread airborne landings. Some commanders believe multiple divisions are involved. Others believe an entire army is descending. Communications are fragmentary. Maps cannot keep up with the pace of events. Counterattacks begin, but without coordination. Small German units clash with paratrooper groups in villages, fields, and along roads. Night fighting favors the attackers. Confusion multiplies. Friendly fire incidents occur. Units hesitate to move without clear orders. Above all, time is slipping away. The airborne mission was never about total control. It was about delay. Every minute German armor remains inactive increases the chances of the beach landings succeeding. As dawn approaches, the sky begins to pale. Naval guns offshore prepare to fire. Landing craft form up in the channel. On land, scattered airborne units continue to fight. Holding ground they were never meant to hold alone. The decisive hours are not over. They are about to begin. Daylight reveals a battlefield no one fully understands. As the sun rises over Normandy, German commanders attempt to assemble a coherent picture. Reports are outdated by the time they arrive. Roads marked clear are blocked. Units listed as intact have gone silent. Officers move cautiously, unsure where the enemy is concentrated. The airborne landings have done what they were designed to do. They have fractured time. German reaction units begin to move, but slowly. Columns halt to investigate gunfire. Patrols disappear. Orders contradict each other. Requests for armor approval climb the chain of command and stall. At Sainte-Mère-Église, fighting intensifies. American paratroopers hold key positions inside the town, cutting German movement across the peninsula. German counterattacks push in from multiple directions, but coordination is poor. Tanks arrive without infantry support. Infantry advances without artillery preparation. Each attempt costs time. Along the causeways leading from Utah Beach, paratroopers fight from hedgerow to hedgerow. Flooded fields force German units into narrow approaches. Small American groups control these routes with machine guns, mines, and ambushes. Some positions change hands multiple times, yet the roads remain contested. This is enough. Far to the east, the situation is no clearer. British airborne units consolidate around the Orne bridges. German forces probe cautiously, unsure of strength. Armor that might have counterattacked hesitates, waiting for orders that do not come. Rommel returns to France only after the invasion is fully underway. Hitler authorizes the release of some armored units late in the morning, but by then, Allied air power dominates the roads. Fighter bombers attack moving columns relentlessly. Bridges are destroyed. Vehicles burn. Progress slows to a crawl. The moment has passed. At the beaches, Allied troops land under fire. Losses are heavy, especially at Omaha. But German counterattacks lack coordination and speed. Reinforcements arrive late or not at all. The window for crushing the invasion closes hour by hour. The airborne landings have not destroyed the German army in Normandy. They have done something more decisive. They have prevented it from acting as one. By the end of June 6th, the Allies hold a foothold in France. The beachheads are fragile, but they exist. Supplies begin to flow. More troops come ashore. The invasion survives its most dangerous day. What the Germans believed they would crush at the water's edge has already moved inland, and the cost of that realization begins to appear. By the end of June 6, 1944, the scale of the airborne operation becomes clear. Allied airborne forces have taken heavy losses. Many units are still scattered. Some soldiers remain missing for days. Others are captured while attempting to rejoin their divisions. Casualty rates vary by unit, but in some regiments they approach the worst expectations made before the drop. Yet the objectives that mattered most have been met. Causeways from Utah Beach are open. The eastern flank near the Orne is secured. German counterattacks are delayed beyond the critical first hours. The invasion has time to breathe. German commanders assess the damage. The Atlantic Wall has not failed everywhere, but it has failed where timing mattered most. Coastal defenses slowed the landings but did not stop them. Inland coordination breaks down under pressure. Units that should have moved quickly are pinned, delayed, or destroyed in transit. Reports describe a battlefield dominated by uncertainty. German forces repeatedly overestimate the size of the airborne landings. Fear of encirclement shapes decisions. Some units withdraw prematurely. Others dig in, waiting for attacks that never come. Civilian accounts confirm the chaos. Villages change hands without clear fronts. Roads fill with refugees. Buildings are destroyed by artillery and airstrikes. French civilians witness the fighting unfold in fragments, never knowing who controls the area until soldiers appear at their doors. By nightfall, Allied air superiority becomes absolute. German movement during daylight proves almost impossible. Columns that attempt to advance are broken apart by fighter bombers. Supply convoys are hit. Command vehicles are destroyed. Communication lines are severed again and again. The airborne units, battered but holding, are gradually reinforced from the beaches. Infantry links up with paratroopers. Heavy weapons arrive. The isolated groups that landed in darkness begin to form a continuous front. The immediate crisis for the Allies has passed. For the Germans, the realization is slower. The belief that the invasion could be crushed quickly no longer holds. The fight is no longer about the beaches alone. It is about containing a growing force that cannot be easily dislodged. And this shift carries consequences far beyond Normandy. In the days that follow, the strategic meaning of the airborne landings becomes unavoidable. German commanders begin to understand that the failure was not a single mistake, but a structural one. The Atlantic Wall had been designed to stop an enemy at a fixed line. The airborne assault erased that line before the first wave reached the shore. Static defenses could not respond to threats appearing deep inland. Communication systems collapsed under pressure. Command authority slowed reaction instead of guiding it. Units acted in isolation, often without knowing the situation beyond the next village. The armored reserves that were meant to decide the battle arrive piecemeal. Some divisions are committed too late. Others are shattered by air attack before reaching the front. Fuel shortages worsen. Replacement vehicles do not arrive. Every movement in daylight invites destruction from above. The airborne landings also forced German commanders to fight defensively from the first day. Instead of counterattacking the beaches, they are reacting to fires spreading across their rear areas. Bridges are lost. Road networks are compromised. Artillery positions are abandoned or destroyed. This changes the rhythm of the campaign. For the Allies, the psychological effect is immediate. Paratroopers become a symbol of initiative and momentum. Their presence reassures beachhead troops that the enemy is already off balance. Commanders gain confidence that German coordination has been disrupted. For the Germans, doubt spreads. Reports from Normandy describe confusion rather than control. Units complain of unclear orders. Officers argue over responsibility. The belief in a decisive coastal victory fades into a grinding defensive struggle. By mid-June, it is clear that the invasion will not be reversed. The airborne forces, though reduced in strength, have bought time measured not in minutes, but in days. That time allows the Allies to land men, armor, artillery, and supplies in overwhelming numbers. The failure to crush D-Day becomes the failure to contain it. Normandy turns into a battle of attrition that Germany cannot win. Every mile gained by the Allies brings them closer to Paris and eventually to the German border itself. What began as parachutes in the dark has reshaped the war in the West, and that meaning lingers long after the fighting moves on. The airborne landings over Normandy reveal a truth about modern war that Germany failed to accept in time. Static strength cannot answer sudden movement. Concrete cannot think. Minefields cannot adapt. When the sky becomes a battlefield, fixed lines lose their meaning. The paratroopers who fell into France did not win the battle alone. Many objectives were missed. Many men were lost. Some actions succeeded only by chance. Others succeeded because small groups acted without waiting for orders. What mattered was not perfection, but pressure applied at the right moment. German defenses were not weak. They were rigid. The belief that an invasion could be crushed at the shoreline ignored the reality of combined warfare. Air power, mobility, and initiative had changed the balance. The Atlantic Wall was built for a war that no longer existed. For the Allied soldiers, the cost was personal and immediate. Many never reached their drop zones. Some died before firing a shot. Others fought for days with little food, limited ammunition, and no clear sense of the wider battle. Their experience was fragmented, violent, and uncertain. Yet their presence reshaped events beyond their numbers. They delayed armor. They disrupted command. They forced hesitation at the moment when speed mattered most. By the time German leaders understood the scale of the threat, the chance to stop it had passed. D-Day is often remembered for the beaches, the surf, the cliffs, the landing craft. But the outcome was decided earlier, in darkness, far from the water. It was decided when German expectations collided with a battlefield that no longer followed their rules. The sky filled with parachutes. The night fractured certainty. And from that fracture came a foothold that could not be erased. The war in Western Europe turned not because Germany lacked strength, but because it failed to act in time. History often turns on minutes, on hesitation, on silence at the wrong moment. In Normandy, it turned when the sky opened, and the ground could no longer hold the past in place.